A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows. Welcome to a very dry Johannesburg, and I mentioned that because that sits in stark contrast to a very, very wet Stellenbosch. And in just a few minutes, we'll show you some video footage of what has been an end of days spell for the capital of the winelands. Just rivers everywhere that didn't used to be rivers, used to be roads and streets and pathways. Extraordinary amounts of water coming down. It does mean dams are looking particularly good, but unfortunately a number of buildings, a number of cellars have taken a bit of a hit, and we'll find out from our guests today what impact it's had on them as we talk through a selection of wines. We're looking today at the art of the red blend in particular. How do you make them? How do you put them together? How do you get it just right? And everybody we've got on the show does get it just right. It's a fascinating aspect of the art of making wine, and it's an art form we discussed today, along with the official wine of Father's Day and a big trophy from the recent Investec Trophy Wine Show, and a particular blend that's getting a lot of people very excited at the moment. And we might have one other guest for a special cameo, but we'll keep you posted as the show unfolds. I must say, before we carry on, the last few days have been fascinating. I've had Kevin Arnold staying with me for the last couple of nights. We did a tasting with Norman Goodfellows and some of the Norman Goodfellows customers on Tuesday evening. We had a lavish lunch yesterday at the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg. We had that lunch with Michael Fridjon, with Tsepang Molisana, with Miguel Chan, with Patson Matonsi, tasting the wines from the family range that Kevin Arnold has now produced. And the wine itself, a lovely Sauvignon Blanc with just enough Semillon to make itself felt, a Chenin Blanc with some beautiful fruit. It's really showing nicely. Tiny amount of sugar, less than 2 grams of sugar, and yet still a lovely rounded sweetness that just comes entirely from giving the fruit everything it needs to come to the fore. And then unsurprisingly for Kevin, a Rhone red blend. There was always a bit of Mourvèdre or similar in the old Kevin Arnold Shiraz. Now he's got a Grenache Mourvèdre Shiraz blend that comes together for another wine that's lovely, and also has a delightfully light touch to it. He's lost none of his winemaking brilliance. He is also, though, a repository of extraordinary stories. And he spent Tuesday evening, when we got back from our Norman Goodfellows tasting, talking me through the time he'd spent working with Robert Mondavi in California, the time he'd spent working with a number of the other great winemakers when he himself was a young winemaker, coming up into Delheim and working with Spat Sperling, and then moving on to Ruston Frieda, and then starting Waterford, and now with this latest chapter. It's been a great few days. So Kevin, if you are watching, and I know he's a regular, thank you very much indeed. And if you'd like to know a bit more about the journey of Kevin Arnold, this week's magazine show, which is now up on our assorted channels, includes 2 pieces. One is a visit out to the Belgians at Almankirk, but the other is sitting with Kevin at Chris Allight's cellar in the Hemelanada Ridge, where Kevin is now making his wine and talking through this incredible journey. Kid from the Karoo via Plet into Stellenbosch, who's become really one of the legends of South African winemaking. So thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everybody who supported Norman Goodfellows, who came out yesterday. We also had a lovely dinner at the Old Oak last night for a series of guests, including Tim Hutchinson from DGB, who came and joined us. We'll be doing some stuff with them next month. That's very exciting. But yeah, look out for those Kevin Arnold wines. They are available now on the Norman Goodfellows website, Norman Goodfellows stores, or on the Dan Really Likes Wine store at Norman Goodfellows. So dig in, great prices, and some lovely wine. We've got some lovely wine to share and to discuss and to drink on the show this evening. Before we do that, though, let's have a quick look at the latest wine news. Well, this is out of Stellenbosch. Look at that. The rain's just hammering down. The sheer volume of water in the town of Stellenbosch has been extraordinary. These are some videos from Andrew Harris and Mark Lester and a few other people. Just torrents raging through the town. An extraordinary storm. It hit large parts of the winelands, but it seems as though Stellenbosch certainly took the bulk of the water. And I think they're still counting up some of the damage. I know in particular there was a big challenge for Lawrenceford, where the Lawrence River had burst its bank. I think the Eerste Rivier also burst its bank. Apparently it's not completely unusual, and in fact Mark Lester was saying that a number of the buildings you see in Stellenbosch are slightly raised up from the road, and that is in the event of flooding. So it's been going on for some time. That's the cellar at Lawrenceford, and sure, it has been quite a few days for Stellenbosch, and we wish all the winemakers in particular affected the very best. This is coming up at Upper Union, lovely restaurant. I ate there not that long ago, and this is in partnership with Avondale, a chance to go and meet the team, to have a wonderful dinner. The food at Upper Union, lots of small plates, is terrific, and paired with Avondale wines, you've got a really good dinner to look forward to in June. Head over to the Upper Union website to find out a bit more and to see what the costs and availability are. It is one I highly recommend. Now this is coming up. This is a tasting, and for the life of me, there we go. It's the Nedbank Cape Winemakers Guild. There's so many tastings coming up, but this is the showcase, and it's one you don't want to miss. I'm going to be at the Johannesburg one on the 30th of August. There's also one on the 24th of August, the Art of Wine with the Cape Winemakers Guild. And you'll see the artwork that is on the glasses there. That is all AI generated. Each winemaker has a very special piece of art linked to them, and you'll be able to discover that along with the Guild wines that our expert winemakers have produced, and those will all be on show in August, and that's in the build-up to the first weekend in October and the annual auction, which is such a great fundraiser and such a great platform to introduce incredible wine from some of not just South Africa's best winemakers, but some of the world's best winemakers. So grab your tickets for that. And if you're in Johannesburg, I look forward to seeing you on the 30th of August, a week before the 24th. We'll be in Cape Town. Now, this is available from the Mayor of Franschhoek, Gerard Holden, has got an 09-14 vertical of the extremely popular Big G. I think this would be a cracker for winter. Get the case, it is the full 6, and the opportunity to run through them in those 6 years. A vertical tasting dinner over winter, I think, sounds like a great idea. I've got my name down for a case. You pre-order these at the Dan Really Likes Wine store on the Norman Goodfellows website, and you'll be able to get those 6 vintages of a blend that really just is, it's Gerard in a bottle, isn't it? It's big and bold and warm and engaging and friendly and fun, and backed up by some serious wine. So that is available now. You can place your order, and those will come through to you once you've made that order available on the Dan Really Likes Wine store on the Norman Goodfellows website. Okay, so there's some stuff for you to look forward to. What I've been looking forward to all day, in fact, for a few days now, is the chance to hang out with some really cool wine people. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show 4 winemakers from 4 very well-known wine estates and brands. So Arlene joins us from Seriously Old Dirt, part of the Vilafonté family. Warren joins us from Neil Ellis. Fanie joins us from Landskroon, and Aldert joins us from Ekendal. Guys, welcome to all of you. Lovely to have you on the show, and a very warm welcome. Although it's not the warmest in Johannesburg, certainly drier though, as we said at the start of the show. And Arlene, we were having a quick chat before the show started. Give us a little update from your perspective on what seems like the kind of weather we should be building arks and collecting pairs of animals for.
Oh, no, definitely that. been a little bit hectic here in Stellenbosch with, like you mentioned earlier, with the news update, with just, the rivers flowing out. I know there's a vineyard close to the Vilafonté winery, and the vineyard just got completely flattened. The fences were taken out. It's been quite intense so far. Luckily today seems to be a bit better. The rain wasn't as intense, but there are a lot of awesome people out there making sure that the roads are being taken care of and putting sandbags out so that it's a bit safer.
All right, let's check in with some other parts of Stellenbosch. Warren, you're nice and high up. How much of an impact did the rain have on Neil Ellis?
On our cellars itself, not so much. Some of the vineyards in and around where we get some of our grapes from, they've been kind of affected, but luckily not destroyed or in any serious damage. But there's a lot of vineyards out there that's been seriously affected.
Well, I'm glad you are in one piece. We are thinking of those winemakers. I'm hoping Aldert's not one of them who's been too badly affected, but let's have a quick check in there as well. Aldert, how much impact has the rain had on you guys?
I just checked. It was about 430 mils that have been poured down to us from the beginning of the year, and about 200 mils in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But it's a bit of water flowing through the vineyards, and it's coming from everywhere. So but not as much, not a problem for us. We're luckily on some slopes, so not too bad.
All right, 430 mils. That is ridiculous. 3 Stellenbosch estates. We saw some of that footage earlier. It seems that all of the winelands certainly had some rain. Talk to us about Paarl. Fanie, how bad was the rain for you guys? Did it have anywhere near the same sort of effect as Stellenbosch?
Yeah, we had quite a lot of rain the last 3-4 months. From March was above average, April, May was above average, and as Aldert said, June has brought his bit, so we are a bit down. I think in 1994 we had about 285 millimeters in June, and so far we've got 205. So we are on our way for a record since 1994. So yeah, it is really wet. Luckily for us, there's not real damage in the vineyards or in the cellar. We are a bit high up, and most of our vineyards are on a slope. So we are lucky, but our dams are quite full, and that's a bit more of a scare if there something happens of overflows or something.
Sure, it's a crazy season. Arlene, from a winemaker's perspective, what sort of impact is this rain having generally, given not just the volume but the time of year at which all of this rain is falling quite so soon, relatively speaking, after harvest?
Well, I mean, Dan, for us, from Vilafonté's perspective, for us, it's perfect timing, actually, because generally our harvest is much earlier than normal, Cab and Sauvignon when it usually comes in. And so the timing is great. The amount of water that we're getting is good for us, because we did have a little bit of issues of getting all of our water in because of, load shedding and those types of issues. So our dam is filling up nicely. The timing is great for us. So yeah, from our point of view, it's been good thus far. We haven't really been affected in terms of any serious damage. But we do understand that our neighbors are facing some issues in terms of what's been happening in their vineyards.
All right. Well, I'm glad there is a positive spin to come out of that. I see there are also some dams looking nicely full. We're going to try and catch up with the guys from Lawrenceford on the show next week and get a sense of how they are doing, amongst a few other conversations with winemakers who I suspect have been affected. Before we get to next week's show, though, there's a rather important occasion to celebrate on Sunday. It is Father's Day, where I am expecting to be lavished with gifts and love and luxury and pampering from my entire family. I'll probably end up being up first and making breakfast for everybody. But the wine I will be pouring on Sunday as a tribute, not just to the wine itself, but to a rather clever campaign from the team at Seriously Old Dirt, is exactly that. the Seriously Old Dirt by Vilafonté, the official wine of Father's Day, Arlene. This has the signature of a certain Mr. Ratcliffe to it as another very clever marketing campaign.
Oh no, that's absolutely right, and this was definitely put together by Mike. But I mean, I think it's very cool. Seriously Old Dirt. When we grow up, our fathers are always the old guy. The just generally old, and so it was a nice sort of play on words. Seriously Old Dirt for a seriously cool dad, so to speak. So yeah, definitely Mike's genius.
As long as it's a seriously cool dad, not a seriously old dad, which I think my children would probably gleefully seize upon. It's a bottle of wine that has been a remarkable success story, bringing out the second label to complement the Series M and the Series C, two proper aristocrats of the South African wine scene. Give us a bit of background, Arlene, to the Seriously Old Dirt, the name behind it and the idea behind it.
Yeah, well, so Seriously Old Dirt, like you said, Dan, is our second label. The name is actually very cool because so Vilafonté, the name comes from the soil which is on our estate in Paarl, which is the oldest documented soil in Africa. So Vilafonté, as some people might know, but was actually started by our two American partners, Salma Long and Phil Fries, with Mike. And Phil Fries is a doctor of viticulture, and he actually, before laying down the trellising system for our vineyards, they did a soil study. And when he did the soil study and they found out that the soil is so old on the top surface, they were walking through the vineyard and he was like, this is some seriously old dirt. And I guess it just kind of stuck and it made sense. So that's kind of where the name comes from. And how it started was that we're so privileged. We have such a great wine club list following. Our members are super loyal, and they get the allocation of Series M and Series C, and it was actually made for our wine club. That's how it started. That's how our journey with Seriously Old Dirt started. So it was all we like to say our super leftover lots who didn't make it into Series M and Series C during the course of blending. That was then put into a bottle, made exclusively for our wine club. And then as it grew, because Seriously Old Dirt is a decade old now, but as it grew and got more traction, now it's a bigger, volume wine. And I work with a lot of producers in and around the Western Cape to produce this Bordeaux blend, which has a signature thread of Vilafonté.
I understand the concept of the old vine and why that is so good for wine, and why Rosa and Andre and the other defenders of old vines have led us into such a wondrous space. What about old dirt, though? Why is having soil so old, earth so ancient, a positive spin for the art of making wine?
Well, I mean, when the soil is old, it also means that it's very nutrient deficient. And when the soils are nutrient deficient, that just means that the vines have to work really, really hard to produce good fruit. Because if you think of the vine in terms of it, what the vine is meant to do is vines produce fruit so that it can be spread by birds and bees and animals and insects. So when the vine works really hard and there's that perfect balance of stress and producing good fruit, because of nutrient deficient old soils, that just means that we get a powerful impact on the grapes, because we are wine growers. We want those grapes to have super intense flavors, concentrations. That's what we found is the impact of our older soils which intrinsically has an impact on the vines, which then produce these amazingly concentrated berries for our wine.
And those translate into the Seriously Old Dirt. I have a glass poured. I'm going to talk through it with Arlene in a moment. Let's head over, though, to Warren. And first of all, raise a glass to you, Warren. The Investec Trophy Wine Show Best Cabernet Sauvignon. I know you win plenty of awards as Team Neil Ellis, following in your father's footsteps. The trophy room must be fairly large by now. But winning this one, you had Jancis Robinson headlining Michael Fridjohn's judging panel across the event. This is quite a special one to have won.
Yes, Dan, it is quite a special one, especially the fact that that Jancis led the panel. And no, our trophy room is actually not that full. They come and take it away at the end of the year. But we try to fill it up as we go along. If we look at Cabernet, that's really, for us, it's at Neil Ellis Wines, it's what we do best. And really the Stellenbosch Cab in itself is a blend of different vineyards in and around Stellenbosch. And for us, the Stellenbosch Cabernet is, let's say, it's how we paint our canvas and how we see Cabernet in Stellenbosch.
You're following in the footsteps of somebody else who made it rather well. Our previous wine is the official wine of Father's Day, the Seriously Old Dirt campaign. You've learnt from your own dad so much of what you do today. Where is the dividing line between following in his footsteps and creating your own legacy, your own style, your own interpretation of, in particular, that Cabernet Sauvignon, but more generally speaking, the wines of Neil Ellis?
Dan, it's I think for me it's quite easy because there's a good foundation has been thrown, so it's basically all that I can do is build on it. I think stylistically there's smaller tweaks. We do a lot more actions in the vineyards. I think as Arlene alluded to old soils. If we look at the areas we source from, we also tend to choose blocks that's, well, for one, grown also in Vilafonté soils, because as she mentioned, it's the poorer, more nutrient deficient soils. So what we find in those poorer soils, although it's got good drainage, but there's also some water holding capacity, you always find that your berries are a lot smaller, more intense, and that's really what we go for these days. Those smaller bunches, smaller berries, and it's for us, it really shows in the wine. And it's at the end of the day, if you work with a good product, it's just so much easier working with it in the winery.
You're also guys who employ a lot of different terroir for the wine you make, and I'll come back to that in a moment, how that influences what you are able to produce. You're celebrating a trophy. Aldert is celebrating a brand new wine. Some rosé with much excitement has hit the shelves running. Tell us a little bit about this new addition to the Eikendal range, Aldert.
Okay, so yeah, it's my first release. So I'm very happy with it, and yeah, it's always a struggle to get the color right. But yeah, we've got 3 blocks dedicated to this specific rosé coming from our farm. It's about it's Grenache Mourvedre Cinsault, and yeah, it's all about the amount that the yields that the year brings, and that will determine the percentage that goes into the blend. Everything that we harvest from the Grenache Mourvedre Cinsault. The Grenache is trellis, the Mourvedre is bush vines, and Cinsault is vine by pole. So everything goes into this, and yeah, it's a very nice light onion color that we produced, and yeah, it's always tricky with the color, and it's a game changer, and I hope everybody can enjoy it. We try and do our best on our side and definitely bring out the grapes quality from Eikendal.
It's another reinforcement of the positioning of rosé in the South African market. For a long time, rosé was generally one of 2 things in many cases. Both, it was often pink and luridly so, and very sweet, and it had a certain style, which certainly wasn't my favorite, but that's the way a lot of it was produced. But it was also often made as almost an afterthought. Oh, we've got some grapes left over, let's use them to make some rosé. The thinking around rosé, and I'm sure it applies to you as well, is reinventing this style so it is a lot more elegant, a lot more savory, a lot more approachable, a lot more just enjoyable, certainly for me to drink, but also rosé made with the intent of making rosé, as opposed to well, let's throw one into the lineup because we've got some leftover grapes. Would that be in line with your focus, your approach to what you've produced with this wine here?
Yeah, so specifically, sometimes people, like you said, leftovers, or they take some of the red wine and they get the juice and there's some color in and they make rosé of that. But this is definitely dedicated to the rosé, each and every block, and we go and pick it specifically for rosé. I do whole bunch pressing on this and very delicate flavors. Try not to handle the grapes too harsh. Like I said, it's whole bunch, and it's just that to get that color right and a very, very light, delicate flavors that come through. So yeah, definitely it's a nice, refreshing rosé that you will enjoy each and every day. Not too sweet, not too acidic, not too dry. It has very nice, light flavors that you can enjoy, and it's not overwhelming.
I have a bottle with me, which I'm going to be trying a glass of at the moment. In terms of this particular wine, is this one of those wines which it was something you always wanted to make personally, or was it more you felt that this was something that Eikenel needed to add to its range, or maybe a bit of both?
So yeah, rosé I never made. I never had it. I never liked it because it wasn't white, it wasn't red. So where is it? But I started enjoying it when I had to make it at a previous cellar. There it was a Malbec rosé, and it was very delicate, and I got into the candy floss and the nice red flavors, and it's a summer wine most of the time, but it's so nice, enjoyable for any occasion. It's a nice starter, nice pre-drink. But yeah, definitely wasn't on my list for producing. But now with this rosé, it's actually very intriguing to do a blend of 3 varietals and not only have one variety in your rosé. And I can actually mention it on the rosé, and I can treat the wines as I want to for this specific rosé. And we go and pick it at the early stage, of course, because we only produce it for this rosé. So yeah, definitely now one of my my house wines, and enjoying it most of the time with friends. So yeah, definitely.
All right. How do you put together a wine like this? We're going to find out in just a moment from Aldo. Let's head over now, though, to Paarl and to Landskroon. I think the last time we chatted about Landskroon, we had Paul on the show. Give us just a reminder for those people who might have missed that show, the background, because there's a lot of history to the Landskroon estate, Fanie.
Yes, it's quite an old farm. Next year will be 150 years that we, or the Villiers family farm here. I always tell people that we don't change a lot around here. We could keep on doing the right stuff, and we keep on doing it right. And so we're from 1874, and in 1974 we're starting with our own label. So we're not some of the first 14 that was celebrated, I think, in this year. But then we started off with a Cinzo, and Cab Franc just followed after that in 1979. So we've got quite a long history. Paul, the current winemaker or current cellar master here, has been here since 1980. So he's got also 43 years of experience on this farm. So yeah, it's quite a long history.
That, I suppose, gives you two different things to balance. On one hand, you've got lots of experience to draw from, people like Paul who can give you so much guidance, but it also comes with a certain responsibility because you've got almost a century and a half of tradition to uphold, and you've got to make sure that this proud Landskroon name stays exactly that.
Yeah, that is actually very much a great challenge to have. Luckily, Paul allows a lot of experimentation. I think everyone in a cellar, or usually it's got 1 or 2 experiments running every year in every cellar. If you start making wine, you've got about 30 times you can try, or maybe 35 times you can try and make wine. So that's your limitation. So you must do the most of it when you do it. So every year we do something, and this year we did a few new things, and they seem to come off. So yeah, every year is a new year, and luckily Paul is very open to new technology or new ways of doing things, and we always do it on the side, and then see if it works. And if it works, we do it with everything, or we start using it more frequently.
Part of that history is reflected in Wine in particular. In fact, it's one we've got. So we managed to get some of the Dan Really Likes Wine store for the course of this month, and that is a rather special red reserve. It bears a rather important name to it. Give us an introduction to this particular wine and why that was the wine that you felt should reflect a rather important member of your team.
Yeah, that is it's a very interesting story, Dan. We started in 2004. I was previously here from 2002 November till about 2007, and the 2003 year was an excellent year. It was a very much depth in wine. We had very big extractions, and it was really huge wines. 2004 came along, and at that stage we had 2 premium in our premium range, the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Shiraz, the Paul de Villiers, named after Paul IV. Now, as I said, things doesn't change here a lot, so we keep our cellar master's name Paul de Villiers. It makes it much easier. But anyway, so Paul IV was the one that started planting these noble varieties here more often, and moved away from the bulk wine type of cultivars. So in 2004, we wanted to make a blend that specifically represents us in the wine industry. And somebody tastes that wine, you'll say that is Landskroon. At that stage, the wine was a Shiraz Merlot Touriga National blend. It was sold out with launching, so it was quite a big success at that stage. But as with things go, and things change a lot, and how you approach wine, this has evolved quite a lot. And since I think 2013-14, they started moving towards a Bordeaux blend. And at that stage, we had Cab Franc, we had Cab Sauv, and we had Merlot in the blend, which worked marvelously. And in 2017, Paul decided to plant Malbec and Petit Verdot. And so the 2019 was the first season we could also use those 2 cultivars. And it was, with a blending, it was a sort of, your eyes opened really, if you see how much a small bit of a cultivar like Petit and Malbec changed in a blend and makes it much more elegant, and maybe bring much more color and vibrancy into the wine. So that was for us a very much an eye-opener. The 2020 now is again, I think it's on the shelf, not on the shelves yet. No, it's not released yet. We're still busy selling the 2019. But that's the same story. Again, the same Malbec and Petit made a lot of difference to the wine. And it's really a wonderful wine.
It's a wine that is also incredibly good value for the kind of space it is. I think it sits under the 200 rand a bottle or thereabouts. How does that wine come together? Well, again, we'll get that question answered shortly. Let's head back, though, to Arlene. Creating this seriously old dirt out of the seriously old soils from which it comes. The process of making this wine, for people who've never really seen wine being made, who don't know how you put together a blend. Arlene, what are the stages in getting it to come together so that it is as good as you can possibly make it from what you've decided to put together?
Yeah, well, I'll see if I can make it as easy as I can for everyone to sort of wrap their brains around. But I mean, the process starts in the vineyard for sure. So you're doing everything you possibly can, like as Warren had mentioned earlier, to make sure that the grapes that come into your cellar are of good quality so that you can make good wine. And so you already have, so for me with Seriously Old Dirt, I've got 4 red wine cultivars, predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, but I also have Merlot, Malbec, and Cab Franc. And so those will be harvested when we decide, the ripeness and the phenological ripeness is perfect. And then we'll bring it into the cellar, and we'll get a lot of our extraction and color during that first stages of fermentation. When the alcohol is still low, the sugars are still high, and all that intensity from the berries are still there. And then we'll go through the fermentation, which usually can go from anything from about 12 to 14 days, depending on the tempo and the cultivar that we're using. Thereafter, for the style that we make, we do individual lots in terms of, like, if the Cabernet Sauvignon came in, we will keep it separate from different lots and different cultivars for as far as possible, up until about 16 months. And then we will actually age those lots separately in older French barriques. And that process will happen for about 16 months. Thereafter, we then do our blending, and we will select, the best quality wines that we have produced, do the blending, taste the wine, decide on the percentage of how much Cabernet Sauvignon, how much Merlot. And something that also would play a part into the Seriously Old Dirt is that we would have that, that thread of the Vilafonté, which is very fruit forward, very plush style on the palate, mouth filling, just basically yummy, easy drinking. Because this is a medium styled Bordeaux blend, so it's just meant to be, juicy and easy drinking, and another glass kind of wine, basically.
And it's a very accomplished little sister to the bigger, better known, the originals, the C and the M, and at the price, it's not hard to see why it does so particularly well. People drink it because they enjoy it. You can buy it and drink it immediately. It's ready to drink. A few more years certainly won't hurt it, but it is there to just wash down happily. I think for most people, they just simply drink it and enjoy it. But if we look at that in a little bit more detail, I've got the 2020 here. What is it about this richness and plushness that you can break down in terms of the different varietals that have gone on in their respective proportions?
Yeah, so like the Cabernet Sauvignon is definitely the cultivar that's going to give you that a little bit of structure, slightly, bolder structure that you get on the palate. And then just that delicate, mouth filling that usually comes from the Merlot. And then, the color intensity is the Malbec that we have and that we produce for this wine. And then that Cabernet Franc is just, I call it the salt and pepper to the blend, it just fills in very nicely. And that's sort of what gives you the different structure, mouthfeel, color in this blend of wine that we're making.
The Seriously Old Dirt official wine of Father's Day. Mike Ratcliffe at his very best. So too, though, is Arlene with a wine that is doing extremely well and is not hard to see why. We've already mentioned that the wines of Neil Ellis are doing particularly well. That is not news in any year. In terms of the wine, we touched on it very briefly earlier. I mentioned the different areas. It's something that you guys have done a lot of. You have the Yonkers-Hoek, and some of your whites. You look a little further afield. That art, Warren, of bringing in wine, not just from different cultivars in a blend, but bringing in from different terroirs, from different areas. How does that open up your opportunity as a winemaker?
So Dan, looking at different varietals these days, we kind of focus on certain areas with certain varieties. Although with something like a Cabernet, we source, basically our Stellenbosch Cabernet is our interpretation of what the bigger is, our interpretation of the bigger picture of Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon in itself. So we source from a couple of different areas, a little bit from Simonsberg. We do some from the Bottleray Hills, from Yonkers-Hoek, also some pockets in the Helderberg area. And at the moment, it kind of sounds as if we're only sourcing at some of the better areas, or to our mind, the better areas. It's certainly areas that bring a unique unique flavors to the blend and unique characteristics.
which gives you an opportunity, but it also, I'll be honest, it sounds mildly terrifying, Warren, because if already I'm trying to make wine from, let's say my own estate, and I've got my own grapes, and how has this season gone? What's impacted on them? Now I've got to worry about 6 other areas. I'm bringing stuff in together, and I'm blending wine not just from me, but I've got some other estates or some other vines somewhere else. All of these different components. Does it get a little bit overwhelming sometimes? And there is just so much you can do to bring a wine together, and you're the one who has to decide which pieces of the puzzle come together.
Dan, I think at this stage it's fairly easy. I mean, we've got almost 40 years of history of Cabernet behind us in Stellenbosch with Neil Ellis wines, and so over the years we've searched different pockets, and we've managed to secure blocks that, to our mind, fit the style that we want. So at the end of the day, we know exactly which block goes into the Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon, and in the vineyard we treat it. We basically manipulate is probably the wrong word, but kind of manipulate the block to suit the Stellenbosch Cabernet portfolio.
That's part of the wine explained. There is one other one I'd like you to touch on in particular. I might have got the name slightly wrong. Is it the Rhodos, the Celtic word for Rhone, where you've got a wine that obviously pays tribute to a particular area and one that you blend there? What's the process behind creating that particular wine?
So just quickly, a little bit of the name Rhodanus. You're right. It's a Celtic name. And the reason why it's Rhodanus, my dad quite fancies Obelix and Asterix. And, well, obviously when he was a kid. And Rhodanus is basically the name the Gauls gave to the Rhone area, which they occupied in the cartoon. So Rhodanus, it's basically a Rhone blend. For me, if I look at Rhodanus, it's kind of a take on Chateauneuf de Pape, although it's not quite all the varieties used. So this is a blend of Syrah, Grenache, and Cinsault. The Shiraz, comes from one particular block in Darling or in Groene Kloof, which to our minds always produce very high quality Shiraz. And then an old block also from Darling or in the Groene Kloof area is basically situated on basically a granitic outcrop. So also very poor soils. It's a lot of decomposed granite in there. And then the Grenache is from Pikkenierskloof, which is all old vines. Vines were planted in 1963. And there's also a lot of vineyards in and around that vineyard that was actually planted due to the cuttings coming from this vineyard. So over time, I think we started with this blend in 2007 when my dad put it together for the Cape Winemakers Guild. And I think back then it was only Syrah and Grenache. These days, like I mentioned, Syrah, Grenache, and Cinsault. And obviously, because it's a blend, the blend changes from year to year. And it also depends on what each variety can bring to the blend at the end of the day.
It's a great tragedy that Asterix in Rhodonos was never written by Goscinny and Uderzo. It would have been a terrific book. And I can imagine the wine equivalent of Obelix, who, of course, fell into a cauldron of magic potion, and so it had no effect on him either. Not many people know when he was just a baby. Ken Forrester fell into a barrel of wine, and that is why alcohol has absolutely no effect on Ken Forrester if you've ever had a quiet night out with the king of Chenin Blanc. Let's jump back to Aikendal and to Aldert, making a blend of rosé. There's the pride in making your first wine start to finish at Aikendal. There's also, though, the challenge of getting this one just right and starting with a bang. Is there a difference to creating a rosé blend as opposed to a white blend or a red blend, or is it a pretty similar process, Aldert?
Yeah, so with the rosé, we try and keep everything separate, the same as with any other blend. You try and keep your components separate and see how they evolve and in what they can evolve to and how they taste. And definitely, like I said, the big challenge is with the color. You never know if you press too hard with the whole bunch, usually not, because it's very delicate. But then if the colors are too delicate, then you need to maybe de-stem and go through the crusher and get a little bit of more color, because you always need to remember the sulfur will strip away some of those nice colors, the red colors, but then it might also be too light. So no, the components we try and keep separate. Definitely with the rosé, you pick the different phenolic ripeness. So yeah, you can't really do everything together, just throw it into a bin and crush it and there you go. We have to go and pick the samples and get phenolic ripeness and the balance between pH and acidity of each block each time. And yeah, of course, then at the end now with me, I use the whole block. So for me, the blend is all about the amount, the yield that the grapes will carry for that season, and I will go on doing that. There's different ways, of course, of manipulating the color. I don't like using activated carbon on my rosé. I feel even if they say it doesn't strip away the flavors, I do feel it does, and that's usually used to lighten the color, but I don't like using it. So it is for me a very delicate process, and for me, keeping it everything different and separate, you can play a little bit around with the color. The Grenache and the Cinsault was a very orange color, and the Mourvedre I did de-stem a little bit and go through the crusher and gave me a nice, very pink, light pink color. But yeah, that's mainly how I do the blending, but it's the same for me with the reds. You keep it separate most of the time as long as possible, and at the end you will blend a little bit.
I'm going to finish off for you with one very, very basic question that I get asked quite often by people who are starting their wine journey, and that is just the actual making of the rosé. You've got red grapes here, but it's not a red wine. It's come out this, in your case, beautifully soft onion skin, a delightful pale and delicate color, which leads into such an elegant wine. How does that work? How are you translating red grapes into a rosé wine?
Yeah, so the normal process, of course, if you get red grapes and you want to make red wine, you go through the destemmer, you go through the sorting table, you can treat it delicately, it ends up in a tank, and at the bottom of that tank for the first 3 or 4 days, you can even have still a little bit of lightness to that juice, that will carry through to your wine. But with the rosé, with me doing a whole bunch, it's very delicate pressing, so it's not as much color that it will extract. That's why you get this onion peel that you in the rosé. But if you try and make a red wine from your red grapes, you will do pump overs and punch downs, and you have to work a lot harder than to get that structure that you want in your red wines. But with the rosé, it's a very delicate process. You don't want that extraction. So it's almost, I keep it sometimes a little bit longer on the skins so that it extracts a little bit more color. But most of the color that you get, or the color that you will get from your red grapes comes from the skins. So you don't want to keep it too long on those skins. And then the other process is blending red wine with white wine. But of course, we like to do it from the vineyards and pick the grapes specifically for this rosé. And that's where we specifically treat them that way. We pick them at a lower bulling, not too high, so that the alcohol doesn't get too high. It's also around 12.5% alcohol, like white wine, so it's picking earlier, not as ripe as with red wines. And all the flavors and color and tannins are in the skins. So with red wines, you will try and get as much of that color and tannins and structure from your skins as possible. But with the rosé, you want to almost like with the white wine, split the juice and the skins directly from harvesting. So then you end up with a delicate color like that.
It is a complex juggle masterfully explained by Aldert, and that is seen in his Eikendal Rosé. There is also some expert blending which goes in to the Paul de Villiers, and just to be clear, this is named after Paul de Villiers, not Paul de Villiers or Paul de Villiers or Paul de Villiers or Paul de Villiers. It's number 4, and it is a wine that comprises of the 5 Bordeaux styles. I think the last vintage Fanie Cabernet Sauvignon was a touch under 50%, and then between 13 and 17 for the other 4 or thereabouts. With those 5 different components, how differently do you have to treat all of them? Do some of them require lots of late nights and careful care and reading them a story to bed, and others just kind of take care of themselves? What's the story with each of those 5 as you put this blend together?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting, Dan, as we try and make all our separate components separately as far as possible. So we try and make the best wine with each one of them. When we get after the whole fermentation and malolactic fermentation and maturing, we go into a process of tasting our wines and seeing how we're going to put together the different components. We do take as guideline the previous years, but I tend to always put, as I said, a different, total different type style of blend also in the mix. And just to make sure that we are on the right way. With Cab being a very structured wine, it's sort of, if you make a flower arrangement, that's the bowl where you put that flowers in. And then you need to put some fruit in there, and then you need a bit of perfuminess in there to get the perfect wine. And what we usually do is we taste the wine separately. We decide which lots are allowed to get into the blend. And then what we do is we do different blends, and it actually is very interesting standing and tasting and doing reblending and then moving the one a bit less and a bit. And it's actually surprising how much that differ if you take 5% more or 5% less of the different cultivars. With the 2021, it was actually very interesting. We had a tasting here in the cellar, and at one stage it was a old couple sitting here, and they came here for wine tasting, and I asked them to join us in the tasting, and actually very interesting to see their reaction to how we taste and what we wanted to taste. They actually came back, I think, a month ago, and they wanted to buy the wine. We said, no, the wine is still in the bottle. It's bottled, but it is still maturing. With this blend, the whole Paul de Villiers range, we usually bottle, and then we still bottle age it, also mature it also for another year. So we take great care to make sure the wine is ready to approachable and drinkable when we release it. But it usually is it's quite an interesting project if you start doing that. That's actually the bit more arty part of winemaking.
Yeah, you might have answered in part, but I'll put the question to you anyway. When you're bringing now these components together, is it all at the same time, or is it a staggered process? And then what is the integration process therein? How much time is optimal to get these 5 different wines you've created to introduce each other and get to know each other and decide they want to be friends?
yeah, that is usually, they don't play around like same as our kids, you know, they don't always want to play with their mates. But usually what we do is we do go about and taste the wines separately, as I said. And as I sort of try to explain, is that we use a sort of, we need a structure in the wine. You need some legs on it. You need some big components there, and that the Cabernet usually gives. We are lucky enough, we have an excellent Cabernet Franc block here, which really produces beautiful fruit, very concentrated, that flinty, sort of flintiness, sort of what you sometimes get. And then the Merlots, we've got quite a wide variety of blocks there that we can use. So if we go into it, we really taste the separate blocks and decide, is this something that will contribute to the wine, and will it make it better? Because that is the thing that you aim for, is the component you must add must make it better, and as a whole it must be better than the separate components. So in that sense, we usually use the Merlot for the red fruit and get the more elegance in there. The Petit and Malbec just give us that sort of, if you're a carpenter, you shave and sort of grind a bit on the sides and just give it a bit of a smooth edges. So that helps a lot with that. So, and then if we blend it, we usually keep it for a month or two in a tank together, and then we go through the process of fining it and sort of just further making it a bit better. And then the bottling starts, and usually we leave it for a year, and that also makes a hell of a difference in the wine at the end.
And as a final question on that blending, which, as we've seen on today's show, does take a little bit of work, plenty of art, and a creative persuasion, as well as the winemaking brilliance, which all four of our guests have in abundance. The novice might think, okay, well, you've now done this year one. It's basically copy and paste for year two. But that's not quite how blends work, Fanie.
No, definitely not. What is great, me and Paul really works well together in that sense, and Kaylin, my assistant, is even if you make the blend the same as the previous year and you put something different, there's always something different, and every season changes so much, you know. This year was a total before the rain and after the rain type of season, and then also the different years bring something totally to the wine that's unique to that year. This year was, for me, a very surprising year, because some of the wines had very much a great extract. Other ones we harvest a bit later didn't have that much. So the blend will change. And that is the great thing about it, is that we can sort of play with it. And even like Warren said with the Stellenbosch cab, even single cultivars these days is a blending job. To get the right blend together to make a wine that is what you stand for in that specific area or category.
It has been a fascinating introduction to blending wine from all of our guests today, as well as touching on some of the aspects of four great South African wine brands. And it's a wonderful way to head into the Father's Day weekend, whether it is armed with a bottle of Seriously Old Dirt or some of the award-winning Cabernet Sauvignon from Neil Ellis, the brand new rosé out of Aikendal, or that Paul de Villiers Reserve Red from Landskroon. Four great wines brought to you by four people clearly not only making wine brilliantly, but having a lot of fun doing so. Guys, to all of you, thank you so much for being part of this show. Glad you've all largely survived the travails of the storms of the last few days. I think electricity might just have paid to Warren's participation. But to Alda, to Arlene, Fanie, guys, thank you very, very much. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. And in whichever way you're celebrating them, and whoever you're celebrating with, have a great Father's Day on Sunday.
Thanks so much,
Dan. Thank you very much, Dan.
There we go. Fanie from Landskroon, Aldert from Aikendal. And that's really cool. That's his first ever wine at Aikendal. That's such a special moment. And I'm really glad we got to celebrate it on the show today. Arlene, with not just the Seriously Old Dirt, but the story behind it. And it is an enchanting story. And the wine out of Neil Ellis as well. Warren following very proudly, very successfully in his father's footsteps. I'm off to join some guests for a dinner I will be hosting this evening. So some more great wine, back and some of a little older. I'll tell you about it next week, when we'll also be catching up with more great friends from the South African wine industry and celebrating a country that blends and otherwise does it all rather well. A reminder, this month there is a chance to win a terrific prize if you're shopping at Norman Goodfellows, and that's the prize from Holden Manse Wine Estate. The opportunity to get down to Holden Manse to spend some time with Gerard and his team, a couple of nights accommodation, some beautiful wine tasting to be done, and the Franschhoek Valley to explore. And that is all courtesy of Gerard and the team at Holden Manse. Whether it is the Big G, of which there is a 6-bottle vertical now available at Norman Goodfellows, or any of the other wines that Gerard and his team are making, your chance to have a really cool wine experience with Norman Goodfellows. Get in store, get online, buy any bottle of wine from Holden Manse, and you could be on your way to Franschhoek for an unforgettable couple of days in one of the most beautiful parts of the wine world. That does it for this evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a lovely long weekend. Happy Father's Day to everybody. We'll see you back on Monday. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Goodbye.